This is a main conclusion question, and when our whole job is to find the conclusion, we don't expect the authors of the test to make it easy on us. They're not just going to plant it at the bottom with a therefore or a thus. And so we're going to look for less common support indicators, words like so or for or after all. We're also going to look for negative contrast words, words like but or however or yet. Those often indicate a separation between background information and the shift into argument mode. It doesn't necessarily have to introduce the conclusion, but it's usually the case that we get someone else's view above a negative contrast word, and the author's view, in this case the economist's view, kicks in below the negative contrast word. And so also we got to look for support. If we're going to like something as the main conclusion, it's got to be supported. So we're told that all businesses want to increase productivity, and then for is a support indicator. So this is why they want to increase productivity, because that increases the likelihood that the business will survive. But the argument goes on further. So even though this is getting supported, it's not going to be the main conclusion. You can tell that the economist has more to say because we're going to kick in with this negative contrast word. And the point here is that not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial. And they go on to support that idea because here are attempts to increase productivity that are harmful. And so this is our conclusion. It's the idea that not all efforts to increase productivity are beneficial. And the reason why is because sometimes they're harmful. And so this is the premise and this is the conclusion. And this is sort of background information. It's just something that we're sort of arguing that everybody wants this, but it's not always good, and here's why. And so I'm looking for a paraphrase of this conclusion. I want an answer choice that says, not all efforts to increase productivity are good for the business overall. Let's go ahead and check out the answers. Answer choice A actually isn't stated anywhere in the passage. This if-then statement doesn't exist anywhere. If an action taken to secure the survival of the business fails to enhance the welfare for the employees, then that action isn't good for the business as a whole. That just doesn't exist in the passage. Our conclusion is not a conditional statement, by the way, right? The conclusion is not all efforts to increase productivity are good. That could also be stated as a sum, like so some efforts to increase productivity are not good. That's another way to say the same thing. But it's not a conditional statement. It's an absolute statement. Sometimes efforts to make productivity better are not good, or not good for the business overall. So I don't want it to be an if-then. Like, if this is true, then that is true. That's not the nature of our conclusion. Some measures taken by a business to increase productivity fail to be beneficial as a whole. They're not good for the business overall. They fail to be beneficial. I like B. It's the best paraphrase of our conclusion, at least so far. Let's see what's wrong with C, D, and E. Now this is going to be a conditional statement as well. Only if indicates a necessary term. So this is only if employees of a business are also its owners will the interests coincide, enabling measures that will be beneficial. We're not saying that the employees have to also be owners, but that's kind of what C is saying. It's putting that on the necessary side, the employees also being the owners. That's not a paraphrase of the conclusion in the passage. So there's really two important steps here. The first is identifying the conclusion in the passage. What's the main point? What's being supported by the other evidence? And then finding the paraphrase, finding something that says effectively the same thing, and recognizing that you can't parallel an absolute statement with a conditional one. There's no business that does not make efforts to increase productivity. So this is saying all businesses make these efforts, but the point is that sometimes they're not good. So the point isn't that all businesses do it. The point is that sometimes these efforts are not good for the business overall. So D doesn't hit our conclusion. And decreasing the number of employees, this isn't mentioned in our conclusion. Oops. Decreasing the number of employees undermines the sense of security of the retained employees. I feel like that was part of our premise here, right? So that's not hitting the conclusion. It's getting really close to one of our premises, to our only premise, really. And so answer choice B is the one you want to like. It is the best paraphrase of the conclusion in the passage.